When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense. Like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.
I even had a gift receipt.
Blog Talk Radio.
Fine as Frog Hair by Ashley Fontainne. Narrated by Homer V. Jones. Can the past heal the future? 90-year-old Marvin Hermish is determined to find out. After sneaking out of the retirement home on a hot and humid Sunday afternoon, Marvin embarks upon a journey. His memory is deteriorating fast, and he's having difficulty recalling the face of his deceased wife, Ruthie. As a short-term memory slips, it awakens memories buried deep from his younger days and vivid nightmares of his youth, including the horrors of World War II. Armed with an empty journal, some water, and his trusty old truck, Marvin heads to his childhood home in the backwoods of Grant County, Arkansas, for one last journey, one final battle. Marvin fights to regain control of his mind and body by confronting the tragedies of the past in hopes of healing the future.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is Off the Chain, and I am your host, Yvonne Mason. And what you just listened to was a snippet from my friend and fellow author Ashley Fontainne's book called Fine as a Frog's Hair. And we will be discussing that book in a little bit. But I apologize because last week I had to cancel all of my shows. Hurricane Matthew decided to visit our fair state, and I had to take my husband out of the state as he is disabled, and I was afraid we would lose electricity and I wouldn't be able to look after him. But my guest from last week will be rescheduled, so don't despair. We will have them on. It's just a matter of getting them back on and get the dates right. Now, on to tonight's guest. From 8 to 9 is my friend and fellow author Ashley Fontainne, and then from 9 to 10, author Bryan Way, a new author, will be on. Miss Ashley is an international and award-winning best-selling author, and she enjoys stories that immerse her readers so deep into the human psychic and the monsters that are lurking within each of us. I've read some of her books. She does that really well. Her short thriller, called Number 75, does touch upon the sometimes dangerous world of online dating. Number 75 took home the Bronze Media and Fiction and Suspense at the 2013 Reader's Favorite International Book Awards and is currently in production for a feature film. Then her paranormal thriller, entitled The Lie, won the gold medal in the 2013 Illumination Books Award for Fiction Suspense and is also in production for a feature film entitled Foreseen. Ashley has delved into the paranormal with a Southern Gothic horror suspense novel titled Growl, followed by the suspenseful Christian mystery Empty Shell. And Ashley has teamed up with Lillian Hanson, who is also her mom, to pen a 3-part murder mystery suspense trilogy titled The Magnolia Series. The first book, Blood Ties, was released in the summer of 2015. 2 other mystery thriller works released in 2015, Whispered Pain and Night Court in 2016. Now, I have known Ashley, and I didn't realize it's been already 5 years. So tonight we're going to catch up on some lost time and talk about some new things. Welcome, my dear friend. How are you?
Thank you so much. What a great introduction. I am wonderful, and it was so awesome that you played that clip because the narrator for Fine as Frog Hair, Homer Jones, just nailed the character, the main character, Marvin. So I appreciate that very much, and I know he does.
I could see him sitting there talking about the character.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing collaboration. Yes.
Let's talk about mine and your history because we've been friends now for a minute. You and I got together when your first book came out, and that was called
Accountable to None. Mm-hmm.
Accountable. See, it's late. I'm brain dead. Accountable to None. And what took you on that journey?
Well, it was kind of funny how it happened, actually. I have always liked to write, and especially poetry, and I have ever since I was old enough to figure out how to do it. But I only did it for, personal release, and every now and then I'd let my family read some of the things I wrote, but it never occurred to me that anybody would like to read what I wrote. But I always had this dream. I'm a big lover of science, and I always wanted to be a nurse. And life kind of got in the way, and got married and had a child. And so I didn't go to college until my late 30s, and when I was going to school to learn to be a nurse. And one of the classes, you have to take some elective courses, and I chose to take creative writing because I thought, I can do that, no problem. Well, I had this amazing instructor by the name of Melody Burning, who at the end of that first semester, I turned in my work, which was basically poetry. It turned out to be what Ramblings of a Mad Southern Woman. It was actually my senior or my project that year. She contacted me and said, you really have some talent. You really should take creative writing too next semester if you need another elective. So I did. And when class started, she told me not to do any homework, that my project for the semester was to write a book because she thought I had the ability to do it. So I was completely floored and shocked and terrified because the thought of actually writing a book was not something that had ever been on the forefront of my brain. But I went ahead and did it, and one of my favorite books of all time is The Count of Monte Cristo. And so I took that revenge tale and I set it in a modern setting, and that's where the book came from. When the semester was over and I turned it in, she loved it and encouraged me to do something with it. And at the time, a little over 5 years ago, this was in April of 2011 when this happened, the traditional publishing world was changing and the self-publishing was coming out, and I happened to read an article about John Locke, who was the first self-published author that ever sold 1 million copies on Amazon. And I thought, I could do that. So I did, just for the heck of it, just to see if anybody would like what I read. And, within 6 months of putting it online, it was an international bestseller, and I was floored. And I was also hooked at that point because I realized, hey, I have a lot of things I have to say. I think I'll just write them down. And so as of today, when I hit the pre-order button on Amazon and Nook and Kobo, I just finished my 17th novel. It's called Ruined Wings. Finest Frog Hair was the 16th. So to say that apparently I did have a lot to say and still have more to say is an understatement. It has become my complete passion. I love every minute of the whole entire process, from the spark of the first idea to finishing a book. Then having them on audio and having these amazing narrators that I have been lucky and been blessed with to bring the words to life. And then, of course, the fact that 2 of the books, and now actually a third, because I've got a surprise announcement to make a little later about Ruined Wings, but to know that they've been made into movies is still kind of mind-blowing to me. And they just wrapped up filming the final scenes in Foreseen, which is based off my book, The Lie, and it's in post-production editing phase right now. And I've seen a couple clips that they've sent to me privately, and it just still is hard to believe that I'm watching people on a screen that are saying my words. I still haven't really grasped that yet.
It's a nice feeling.
Yes, it is. So that's how I got to be where I'm at. It was a crazy journey. Still is.
Do you have the same trouble I do, and that is shutting the voices up that are in your head?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they love to wake me up in the middle of the night with an idea. Yeah. And I'm like a crazy possessed person that once the idea starts, until I finish it and get the story done, that's all I can think about. I mean, even at work during the day when I'm supposed to be doing other things, in the back of my mind, I'm constantly thinking, okay, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next?
And
so,
we never know what those characters are going to do because they change.
No. Mhm. Exactly.
This is what people don't understand with us as writers. when we're writing something, and you can attest to that, we may want them to go in one direction, but guess what happens? They're not going to have it that way.
Right. Yep, they take on a life of their own, and you just have to write whatever it is that they have to say or do.
Or they'll drive you crazy.
That's right.
On your website, I was reading some things to get prepared for tonight's show, and as with all of my guests, I try to do things a little bit differently because, sometimes we get the same old interview, what makes you write, what's your favorite author, yada, 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 and we really don't get to know the person behind the book or the person behind the name. So what I like to do is bring the person to the show and allow the listeners to know that person. And one of the things that was on your blog is something that's very personal to you, and we had talked about it briefly before the show started, and that you feel very strongly about something, and that something is not just a one person or a one moment thing. Would you like to expound on that for our audience? And maybe you will make a difference in someone else's life.
Well, thank you. I would love to. Like so many other people in this world, I love an addict. My son is a recovering addict, and it has been a extremely painful, gut-wrenching roller coaster ride for the last 7 years, 8 actually. And for those that know me personally, they'll know that when I wrote Night Court was the start of my anger stage of all the things that had happened and just being so frustrated with the whole drug culture and what it does to people, that for me to be able to cope with it instead of actually going out and doing what the main character did, I wrote about it. And it did help some. It helped assuage some of my anger. But, of course, it did not stop the real-life situation. When things got a little bit worse, I remember sitting with my husband and talking about my next book that I was going to write, which turned out to be a 3-part series called the Rememdium series, and which is zombie genre, which is something I had never written in before, even though I love zombies. I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead. But I remember telling him, I want to write something in the zombie genre because, A, I love the subject matter, and B, I want to do it in a way that's never been done before. Most zombie books and shows like The Walking Dead, either they don't tell you how it started, how the zombie apocalypse started, or it's something like the government or, something of that nature. But because I felt so strongly about how drugs have just invaded and permeate every inch of our society, I decided that the zombie apocalypse was going to happen because of drugs. And we had one group of people that were trying to cure drug addiction permanently, and they were successful after a very long time of research. Unfortunately, there was a mole in the lab who happens to work for El Salvadorian drug cartel, and the formula that cures addiction is stolen. The reason the drug dealers decided to do that is their thought pattern was, well, if this formula will make drugs make you not be addicted, then if we tweak it, it will make them more addicted. And so what happens is they mess with the formula, and then, of course, when people take the drugs that are tainted with this formula, they become zombies. And it was my way of trying to show this is a serious topic in our world. On my blog, the very first post that I did was about addiction as a family disease, because it is. It affects everybody in the family. And there's a link to a CNN article about drug abuse and how fast it has taken over our society, and it's now the number one killer in certain areas, surpassing car accidents and things of that nature that we have to deal with. And, for me personally, I hid what was going on. I didn't talk about it publicly. I tried to deal with it on my own within the confines of our family. Of course, I was the queen of enablers, and I'm giving up that crown, and I'm trying to go back down the rung instead of going, keep going up. But once I finally realized that, there were some things that happened this year that really struck my son, and thank goodness he made the decision to go into rehab, and he's been clean and sober now for a little over a month. But it is the reason why I started talking about it on my blog is not about the addiction itself. It's not for the addict. The blog posts are about the families and how it affects them and how to try to get through all the struggles that come along with loving an addict. Learning to realize that, you didn't cause it, you can't control it, but you can contribute to it. And it's hard, especially as a mother, because it is in our nature to be nurturing and want to take care of and fix everything, and there's some things that we just can't fix, and this is one of them. And I think my eye-opening experience was the first time I had gone to one of the meetings for families in addiction, and of course I'm still being stubborn of, well, I can't let him not do X, Y, Z, and the gentleman that leads our group looked at me and said, well, what would your son do if tomorrow you died? How would he handle this? And that was really sobering for me, because I thought, oh, my gosh, I hadn't thought about that. And so I'm having to learn how to deal in this situation and how to still love him but yet not love him to death, and not be the one that he comes running to, that he's got to learn to solve his own problems, and he's got to pay some of the consequences that come from the actions that he's done. And that is extremely hard. When you love someone, you don't want them to hurt, you don't want them to be sad, you don't want them to be sick, but unfortunately it happens sometimes. And so that's why I started posting, with permission of Families in Addiction here in Arkansas, every lesson that we have every Tuesday night. And that segues into my next book that actually comes out in December, and it's called Ruined Wings. And this time, as opposed to me writing the story from a angry and heartbroken mother who wants revenge on all those that were involved in her son's death, I wrote it from the perspective of the addict, and how easy it is, especially, the main character is only 17 years old when her world falls apart, and how she handles it and the things that happen after the big emotional upheaval in the family. Like so many, she turns to drugs to numb the pain, and it ends up leading her down a really dark path. But even though there's a lot of terrible things that happen to her and she does suffer some major consequences, in the end there's hope, and it comes in the form of not a family member, not a friend, but a complete stranger who, by divine intervention, basically steps in and shows her the way to change her life. And so it was really important for me to be able to get that across, because there are so many people out there that not only are addicts, but those of us that love them that need to know these things and need to know that there is a way to get past it if you really want to. And so that's how that came to be.
Do you find that, and you and I talked about this earlier, addiction can be anything. Addiction can be drugs, alcohol, sex, lack of impulse control. Anything under the sun can become an addiction. And when the addict is pursuing that dead-end road, they blame everybody but themselves.
Exactly.
Did you find that you were getting, well, Mom, if you hadn't have done this, Mom, if you hadn't have done that, Mom, if you'd have just done this, I wouldn't be this way?
When he was younger, yes. But, of course, that's early 20s attitude anyway, for most people, whether they're addicted or not. As he got older, no. As a matter of fact, there were times over the years where we would have heart-to-hearts when he was sober, and I would break down and cry and say, I'm so sorry that I didn't do X, Y, Z, or that I did X, Y, Z. And he would just flat out tell me, Mom, it's not your fault. You didn't raise me like this. You didn't put a needle in my arm. You didn't give me a pill. You didn't give me something to snort. You didn't do it in front of me. You never did anything like that. These were my choices. my stupid choices. And so I am blessed for that, because there wasn't that moment where it was, well, if you wouldn't have done this, then I wouldn't have done this, So
and that you are blessed, because you were already carrying around a burden that wasn't yours to bear. And
right.
sadly, the unintended consequences of an addiction is the collateral damage of the people around them that can no longer bear the guilt that's not theirs to bear.
Right. And the other thing that happens, and one thing that I have learned in these classes that I've been going to, is as the enabler, we're addicted too. We are addicted to our addict. We are, because our sole focus becomes about them, just like their sole focus becomes about whatever they're addicted to. And I found myself, and I hate to say this, but it was the truth, and I know people that have been in a similar situation will be shaking their heads in agreement. When he was in rehab, even though I was terrified and I was worried, there was also a huge sense of relief and peace, because the drama stopped. For that whole month, when there was no phone calls, there was no, oh my God, I've had a wreck, or oh my God, I've been arrested, or just the general, oh my God, I can't handle life phone calls. It was quiet. And it gave me a chance to really reflect and take a deep breath and say, okay, here's where we are. Now what? So you don't realize.
And I'm sure
you don't
Go ahead, babe.
I was just going to say, you don't realize, at least I didn't, how addicted to him I was, and how that had been my sole focus until it was taken away. And then it was like, oh, wow, I really did have a problem, because all of my attention was on him. It affected my job. It affected my marriage. It affected the rest of our family members, because all of my attention was focused on him and what he was doing. And is he okay? And is he sober today? And, every time the phone would ring, I would jump when it was his number, saying, oh, God, what now? And so I didn't realize how much of a problem that had been until it stopped for a while. So every day is a learning experience, just like they have to learn new behaviors and new ways to deal with things. We, as the family members, do as well. We have to learn not to jump when they snap their fingers or they call in that panic mode. And, our first inclination is, okay, we got to solve this. And that's a hard thing to do for a mother, especially one, I have 3 stepchildren, but my son is my only biological child. And so I'm extremely attached to him. Not that I don't love my other children, but, that's my baby. And so it's been really hard to deal with that. But, it's an everyday process. And I really hope that that people do have a chance, because there's a lot of people that either are too embarrassed or ashamed to go to some type of meeting, or maybe they don't have the way to actually get there. They might not be able to drive, or, maybe they have a medical reason why they can't get out, but they can get online. And so that's why, after talking to the people that run Families in Addiction, and I asked them, may I put this stuff out on my blog each week? And they said, yes, if we can help anybody, we'd love to. So, if the listeners out there, if you are a loved one of an addict, I encourage you to go and read through the first 2 posts that I have. It's going to be a continuing journey that I'm going to try to post every week as I go through this, and hopefully it will be able to help someone else as well.
That is excellent. See, you're already paying it forward, my friend.
I'm sure trying, because
you're already helping someone because of where you've been and what you've had to deal with. And then you get to put it in books. And books also help, because even in fiction, we learn lessons. Right. And speaking of, go ahead, baby.
I just do want to say one thing real quick, that Ruined Wings is not about me or my son. It is completely fiction. I step back, and I've known over the years several addicts, and Callie's story is kind of a conglomeration of several of them. Some of the things that happened to her have happened to me and my son, but the majority, 95% of it, is complete fiction. So I just want to put that out there.
but they can still learn lessons.
Yes, they can.
Let's talk about some of these wonderful, wonderful books. Let's start with the one that we heard the clip of, Fine as a Frog's Hair. And you and I talked about this earlier. When I would call my father, who lived in Georgia, I live in Florida, I would call him, and I would say, Dad, how are you? And he'd say, I'm fine as a frog's hair. And for people in the South, we know what that means. It means life's great. Doesn't get any better than that.
Right.
Tell the audience about Fine as a Frog's Hair, because that is one of my favorite books that you've written.
Well, thank you. It's based in part, the majority of it is based in part of my grandfather's life. He was, and that was his name, Marvin. He grew up here in Arkansas in a small town called Sheridan, which is in Grant County. It's about, about 50 or 60 miles from south of Little Rock. And, of course, he was born in 1927, couple years before the Depression started. And the story is short. It's only about 10,000 words, but it's his last day on Earth, and he doesn't know that. But he's 90 years old, and he's been living in a retirement home. His wife has passed away. He's all alone. They don't have any children, and his mind is starting to slip. And so he sneaks out of the retirement home and plans on making a journey, just like the wonderful narrator said. He decides that he's going to go back to the small cabin that his family built out in the woods and try to recall some of his past, because he's afraid that as his dementia starts getting worse, that he's going to get to the point that he can't remember anything. So when he goes out there, of course, he's planning on just sitting down. He takes a journal with him because he's going to write notes so he'll be able to remember later. And when he gets there, he's flooded with memories. And so the majority of the story is him remembering his childhood from the first memory he has. I remember my grandfather, and most of the book is stories of his life, but one of the things that always made me laugh was his first real memory was sitting outside in the chicken coop and playing with the little baby chicks. And he would squeeze them and hug them, and then when they quit moving, he'd grab another. Well, of course, he didn't know it because he was only 3.5 years old at the time, but he was actually crushing them to death. And by the time his Meemaw, which was my great-grandmother, found out, he'd already killed, I think, 5 or 6. And, of course, that was the first time he got a real whipping. Because, back then, that was food, that was sustenance for them, that was how they survived. And so that's his first memory. So as he starts remembering, his mind is slipping faster. Even though he's remembering the past, he's hearing voices. He's hearing the voice of his wife, who is past. He's hearing the voice of his Meemaw, who is past. And as he gets closer towards growing up, as he's remembering things, there's a tragedy that he remembers happening that changed the course of his life and everybody in the family. And the anger overwhelms him. And at the end of it, he finally comes to terms with it, which is, a very poignant part of the story, because we all have that moment when his wife tells to him, the anger that tethers you here is no more. And we all have to get to that point where, because let's face it, we're all angry about something. I mean, that's just life. And some people never let it go, and he finally did. And so it was really important for me to tell that story, because in real life, let me back up. In the story, he has a moment where he does forgive someone in his life that hurt him really bad. And in real life, he never did, at least not to my knowledge. And so I did change some aspects of his real life and had it where he did seek that moment of forgiveness and embraced it. And that was really important to me, because I really wanted to get that across to the reader, that, something that has, especially if it's something that you think it was a certain way, but in reality it was something completely different, and you'd held on to that all these years, and then when you find out the truth, it just punches a hole in your heart. And so I really wanted to bring that forth in the reader to the reader, and was just blown away by the audition of the gentleman that ended up narrating the book, Homer V. Jones. I could not have picked a better person to narrate that book. He just did a fantastic job, and so it's something I'm proud of. But it's, like I said, it's a lunchtime read. It's not a full-length novel by any means, but it was something that was personal to me, and that I wanted to put that out there and show that I don't write just blood and gore and or revenge. I am capable of writing something else.
See, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, I read that book, and it's one of those books that stays with you long, long, long after you have finished it. Part of you wants to know the prequel of the story, how he got to where he was. The other part of you wants to say you can finally let it go now because you found peace within yourself. And in life, it's like Ashley says, we have to find that peace because none of us wants to die angry. And when we hold on to anger and when we hold on to grudges and when we hold on to hurts, whether intentional or non-intentional, what happens is we're only hurting ourselves. We're not hurting the person that hurt us or we haven't forgiven, or we're not hurting them because they've moved on. The only person that we hurt is ourselves. And this book teaches that life's lesson. Am I correct, Ashley, that it teaches that life's lesson? And the bottom line is when we are at the end of our days, we should be able to be at peace, just like Marvin was.
Exactly. And the other thing that it brings out, too, is that part of his life that altered the course and became the seed of anger, it ended up affecting other people as well. It affected his wife, and it affected the rest of his life, and not in a good way. And, you know, that's something else that I wanted to bring out as well, is just because you've had something done to you or experienced something that was painful and traumatic or someone has wronged you for whatever reason, if you hang on to that and that anger grows into a big tree inside of you, it will affect everybody around you, and usually not in a good way. So.
And I'm telling you, people, go get the book. Get the audio book. Download it on your Kindle. Read this fantastic book because you won't think the same when you're finished. Now, Growl. Let's talk about this strange book.
It is strange, but I'll tell you how I got the idea for it. There's so much, and I'm probably not going to quote the right genre, but the New Age paranormal that always has, you know, think Twilight or something of that nature where you've got paranormal involved in teenagers' lives. And I use Twilight because, in my opinion, Bella was stubborn, and she didn't care about those around her. She only cared about what she wanted, and she was willing to give up a lot of things and hurt a lot of people to get what she wanted. And I didn't like that, and I don't like how teenagers are being portrayed as being selfish creatures. So I came up with the idea for Growl and used the paranormal, and of course I used big shape-shifting cats because, or it's actually in the book it's called Skinwalking, because I'm a huge fan of big cats. And this teenage girl finds out that she is next in line for as a guardian of the Tree of Life, and it happens to be in the backwoods of Mississippi. And for her to take on this duty, she's going to have to walk away from the life that she knows, and she has to make this choice about whether she's going to do that or not. And I wanted a character that was, even though she was a young teenager, she made the right choice. She did what she knew she needed to do for everybody at the sacrifice of her own wants and needs. So that was really important to me because, again, there's so many of the books out there where the younger generation is coming off as very selfish, and they will hurt whoever they have to get what they want. And I thought, no, I'm going to write something different. So that's where that idea came from.
And apparently doing very well.
Yeah, it was probably one of my favorite books that I've written because it was so different. You know, I had to do a lot of studying about, there's a lot of Native American lore in there about skinwalking and the tribes, the Choctaw and the Chickasaw and the Trail of Tears and the things that have happened, because in the story, the guardian of the Tree of Life, which from the Garden of Eden is, like I said, actually in Mississippi, and the Native Americans were the ones that were in charge of watching over it because they were the only tribe that truly followed God's will anymore. So there was a lot of history that I had to go through and study about before I could even start writing this story. But there are some bloody scenes in it because, of course, she does eventually shift into a big cat, and there's some deaths that happen, and there's a lot of deceit and trickery. But at the same time, the story of family and the family bonds and the family unit working together for the greater good of mankind was really what I wanted to get across.
Ladies and gentlemen, they just keep getting better and better. Now, let's go backwards just a little bit to Accountable to None. That was the very first book that you put out.
Yes.
And then behind that was Zero Balance, and then Adjusting Journal Entries. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you, I've read all three of these books, and they will make you stay up at night. Trust me. Tell our listening audience about these lovely three little books.
Well, I will tell you that the first book, it was my first go-around with writing, and I've come a long way since then. But as I said earlier, it was my take on a modern tale of revenge, and the premise of the book is it takes place at a very large accounting firm in Arizona, and the partners that run the firm are despicable and do a lot of really bad things. And one of the junior partners is called into the office of the managing partner one night, assuming she's going to get promoted. And in turn, when she gets there, she's surprised because that's not what it's about. He ends up raping her. And at first he comes on to her, when she, turns him down, he ends up raping her. And she finds out the next day that all the other partners knew what was going to happen and didn't say anything. And so instead of going to the police and involving that, she is, here we go again, she's stuck in anger and she can't get past that. So she decides she's going to get revenge. And so for 5 years, she plots and waits, and she stays working at the firm and plans out her revenge. And so the first book, she gets it. And at the end of the first book, the main character that raped her is arrested, and now he's planning his revenge. The whole point of me writing this series was how revenge is a cycle. If someone hurts you and you seek revenge against them, then guess what? They're going to want to do the same thing, and it's just never ending. And so in the next two books, you find out that things weren't exactly as she thought that they were, but there's a lot, even some more despicable characters than just the man who raped her. And so I really wanted to get across to readers that if you take that path of revenge, which we all have that moment when we want to. When someone hurts us, what do we want to do? We want to get back at them. And she does that in a very big way. But unfortunately, the side effect of that is she hurts a lot of people, not just the one that initially hurt her. And so now there's a whole group of people that all want their own revenge, and it just kind of spirals out of control until the end of the third book when things finally calm down. But even at the end of the third book, you see that there's two characters that in the past have been just minor outsourced characters. All of a sudden, now they want revenge. So it just never ends, and that was the whole point of me writing that series was, if you take that path, be prepared, because it will not be over. It won't be finished as soon as you get your revenge. It's just started.
There's no zero balance.
No, not at all.
It just keeps escalating. The series you wrote with your mom. Tell the audience about that series.
Well, we've only written the first book. There's three. There's going to be three altogether, and as soon as I finish writing the screenplay for Ruined Wings, which, by the way, has already been optioned for film, yay, we're going to start on the second one. We've already got the outline mapped out, but we base a lot of it off of the two of us. The relationship between the mother and the daughter in the book is so me and my mom. And I actually approached her about writing it because, and the story that it's about, because my mother worked for years in the senior housing industry, and talk about a crooked and deceitful place and a horrible thing that we do to our seniors. And anyway, that's where the idea came from. So we sat down and we talked about this, and my mother and I were both raised in California, even though her father, my grandfather Marvin, was raised here in the South. And in the story, they both end up moving back to Arkansas because the father is getting frail and is considering going into a nursing facility. And the mother is a retired cop, and the daughter is a private investigator. And the mother worked for a long time on this big senior housing case in California, and the daughter had been the private investigator that worked on it as well. And so when they know the ins and outs of the senior housing industry, and they're disgusted by it. So as soon as the grandfather says, well, we're thinking about going into a retirement facility, they say nope. So they pack up and they come to Arkansas. And so, of course, there's some really funny scenes in it of them dealing with living in California, all of a sudden coming to the South. It's kind of an eye-opening experience. And but as there's a little bit of romance for both of them when they get here. But the main plot of the story is, on the flip side, Arkansas has always been known, especially Hot Springs, for having a connection with the mob. And in the story, there is still a mobster here. And what he is doing, and him and his family, they have a nice little scheme going of taking seniors that have no family left but have money. And they not only do they take their money, but they kill them, and then they harvest their body parts for the black market. And so Leanne and Katrina, who are the daughter and the mother in the story, end up getting involved because their grandfather's best friend happens to live at the Magnolia House, which is where this is taking place. And so I won't say any more about that, but it's funny. It's scary. There's some scenes with the lead mobster, Cesar, as he's starting to slide off into insanity that are pretty harrowing. There's some good revenge, and there's a couple love scenes in it, not a whole lot, but it was so much fun writing this with my mom. We just had a blast. And so we've got the next two plotted out. We just haven't had a chance to put them on paper yet.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I am speaking with my friend and fellow author, Ashley Fontainne, and if y'all have just tuned in, you have missed one heck of a show. We've talked about everything on the spectrum, from drug addiction to the elderly to books to you name it, because this is Off the Chain, and this is Yvonne Mason, your host, and we have been known to get off the chain here. We have a few minutes left, and before it gets too late, because you are going to hang around to help me with a second guest, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that'll be fun. Yes, in the 9 o'clock hour, I will be speaking with new author Bryan Way. That should be really interesting because he writes some really scary stuff. But what I would like for you to do, sweetheart, if you will, is tell folks where you can be found, and then I want you to give some advice.
Ooh, advice. Okay, well, I have a website, of course. It's www.ashleyfontainne.com, and that's FONTAINNE. You can find me on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook, I think Instagram, Google+. Just Google my name, and it'll come up. All of my books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Nook, or iTunes, Kobo. I also have a blog. It's called Ramblings of a Mad Southern Woman at blogspot.com, and that's where you can find some of the posts about addiction and for families to deal with. And advice, I guess really all I can say is if it is your passion to tell stories, don't ever stop. And grow some thick skin, because that's your baby. You've shed blood, sweat, and tears to write a story and you're so proud of it, and then it goes out into the world, and then people shred it apart. I mean,
yeah, they do.
Some people, yes, 99% of the people will like it, and then that 1% that doesn't, that just finds so much joy in tearing you, not only as a writer, but as a person, to shreds. It's painful. But it's going to happen, and you've got to be prepared for it, because not everybody's going to like your baby. That's just the way it is. Not everybody's going to think it's a great piece of literature or it was a fun read or whatever. They're going to just hate it for whatever reason. So be prepared for that, but don't give up, because there have been so many times when that you get these great reviews and you're all pumped up and excited about it, but what do you remember? You remember the negative ones, just like somebody can tell you you're funny or you're beautiful or you're a great worker, and you don't kind of really remember that. You remember you're ugly, you're not funny, you're mean. You remember the negative things, and you've got to learn to push past that, because had I given up, I would never have been where I'm at now, and I wouldn't have signed with a New York agent, and movies wouldn't be made. None of this would have happened if I would have said, you know what, I'm done. I took the negative criticism and I learned how to hone my craft better, and apparently I still have a lot to say, and most writers do, so just don't give up. Just keep going, plow through it.
And that's true whether you have a story to write, whether you have a song to write, whether you have a picture to paint, whether you want to start a business. It's whatever your passion is. You have to stay passionate about it. And Ashley and I have cried over bad reviews. We've cried over hate mail. We've cried over, you name it, we've cried over it. But the thing is, that didn't kill us. It only made us stronger, because she and I both are very strong Southern women, and you can bend us, but you're not going to break us. Right, Ashley?
That's right. Weeping willows bend, but they don't break.
We'll go with the wind, but you can't break us at all. And if you have that dream, and that dream is that important to you, and you don't fulfill that dream, or you don't work towards that dream, and I'm sure Ashley will agree with me, you have already failed.
Right.
Simply because you did nothing. And at the end of your days, when you're laying there and someone says, do you have any regrets? And you say, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't do that. Well, it's too late then, because you wasted those years saying I shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Exactly. And the other thing I want to add to, I know you're getting ready to bring another guest on, but I do want to add this as well. I have been overly just shocked ever since I started posting on my blog about addiction. I have been amazed at the amount of support and feedback that I've got from, some of them have been friends, some of them have been complete strangers. And you never know how, when you step out of your comfort zone and open up your heart, how it's going to resonate with other people. And that has been a big blessing for me, because A, you realize you're not alone, which is amazing. And B, you know that if your tragedy can help someone else get through their own, what a blessing that is. And if you stifle that and don't do it because of fear or because of worry about how someone's going to perceive you or of the negative reviews or XYZ reason, then you're denying someone else that maybe you were the person that was supposed to help them. You don't know. And so I won't do that anymore. Thank you.
And what we forget is no man is an island.
No.
No matter how hard we try to be an island, we're not. And when we interact with other people, if it's just the cashier at the grocery store or a stranger on the street, we leave a part of who we are with them, and we bring a part of who they are with us.
Exactly.
And you don't know what that smile is going to do for someone else, because you don't know what burdens they're carrying.
Nope, you don't. And, you may never know. And you may never know that random smile or that random word or that random act of kindness that you did, you may never know how it affected somebody, but they know. And that's what's important.
And you feel better for it because you gave them that smile.
Hopefully.
Even on my worst day, and I've had some pretty bad days, even on my worst day, if I smile at someone or I tell them that they have a beautiful smile or their hair is pretty or I like their tie or they look beautiful in that color, I feel so much better within myself that I have forgotten whatever it was my worst day.
That is so true. I agree with that 100%.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a passion, and Ashley and I both have had some pretty rocky roads, trust us, but if you have a passion, or if you need to reach out, fulfill that passion. Don't think you're alone because you're not. There are people out there that are going through the same journey that you're going through. It might be to a different lockstep, but it's the same journey because my addiction might not be your addiction or my ailment might not be your ailment, but the perception and what's the word I'm looking for, Ashley? The emotional pain, the emotional impact that it has is the same, regardless of whatever the reason is. The hurt is there. Yes. And the need to know I'm not by myself. I'm not in these four walls alone. There are people out there, and you might not even know them today, but that's the person you need to help you get through whatever it is that you need to get through. Because God knows I couldn't do without Ashley and all the other people that I have in my network that have helped me through some pretty rough stuff in the past couple of years. They have been absolutely fantastic. And if I had not had that network, then I can't tell you what my life might have been like.
Exactly. And you probably really don't want to know.
No, because the monkeys will tell you that it's not pretty. Just not pretty at all.
Nope, I completely understand.
But if you've got a dream, live your dream. Because trust me, it's so much fun when you do. Ashley can tell
that
you.
Is so true.
It is. She and I never know what's going to come out of our heads. We don't know where that story. We don't know what that character's going to say.
No, and sometimes they surprise us. Oh, really? That's where we're going? Okay.
I didn't know that. Or I wanted to go in this direction, and they're saying, "No, idiot. We know where we're going."
That is the strange part about being a creative person, whether you sculpt or you paint or you draw or you write or whatever it is that you do in that creative passion. It just, if you stifle it, it will drive you crazy. If you let it go, sometimes it might drive you crazy, but the crazy on letting it go is usually a little bit easier to deal with than the crazy of stifling it.
Yeah, because if you don't let it do its thing, things happen. Around this house, things move around, doors open, Christmas trees fall. I blame it on my sister, but I really sometimes think it's my characters that have had enough of me and want to do things their way. And if I really get cranky with them, I don't know if yours do it or not, but if I really get cranky with them and I'm just insistent on taking a story one way, they will completely shut up and I can't write.
Well, I can't say that I've had that happen to me yet, but they do insist that once the story starts, that they're insistent that I finish it and tell what it is that they have to say. So, it'd be, that's my addiction, I guess, because once they start, I have to let them take over. So.
Yep. Because if you don't, they'll just harass the daylights out of you. When I was doing A Voice from the Grave, I wanted it to go one way. I wanted to write it one way, and I couldn't write it that way because every time I would sit down and write it that way, my character would shut up. So I finally said, okay, how do you want to write?
Lost.
Yeah, how do you want to write the story? Just go ahead and take over my hands and write the story. And it did, and I never had any more issues.
Yeah, it's a strange experience, that's for sure, when the voices start talking to you, Got to let them go. But it's so much fun, and I have made so many friends like you and, so many others, and especially now that, when I first started, I was paying somebody to do all of my formatting and my book covers, and I finally said, that's expensive. Maybe I need to learn how to do this. So I did. And so now I actually design covers and format for other people as well, and that's pretty fun. One of the neatest things that happened was a fellow author by the name of Joanna Lee Doster. She wrote this incredible children's story called Tales of Jax at the Metropolitan Opera. It's kind of based on her real dog, who actually was in the Metropolitan Opera. And so she wrote this book, and I designed the cover, and it is now at the Metropolitan Opera, sitting in the gift shop. So knowing that I got to design a cover and help her, with this story, and that it's out there, it's very rewarding. So you never know. I mean, I've got to take the creative edge and not just do it in writing, but also designing covers and things like that. So I never would have thought 5 years ago I would have been doing all this on my own, but I am. And helping others, it's a lot of fun. So.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, our second caller of the evening has just called in, and so very shortly here, I've got him in the queue. He hears us, but we're going to finish up with Ashley real quick. She is going to stay and sort of be my co-host with this young man and see what we can draw out of him. One never knows on this show. Again, this is Off the Chain, and as your host, we never know. Ashley, my friend.
Off the chain just went off the train.
There you go. And anybody that reads my Facebook page knows that, too. Again, tell the folks where you can be reached. And, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, if you don't go get her books, the monkeys will have to pay you a visit because her books are absolutely to die for. So tell them where you can be found, sweetheart.
All of my books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and iTunes. I have a blog. It's Ramblings of a Mad Southern Woman at blogspot.com. My website is ashleyfontainne.com, and, of course, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the other crazy social media that we have to keep up with as authors. But that's it. Just Google the name, and the books will pop up, and some of them are free. Most of them aren't, but the first book in each series is free. So you can, if you're interested in seeing what they're like, you can get one for not a penny and start out, and then be welcome to your new addiction.
You took the words right out of my mouth. And I will be bringing Miss Ashley back. She is coming back next year. I always bring my special guest back because, as Johnny Carson used to do with Dom DeLuise and some of those folks, he would bring them back because they were so hilariously funny and people loved them. So, Ashley, I will be bringing you back because by then the new book will be out, and
yes,
the screenplay should be
December
finished.
12th. Uh-huh. Yes.
So we will have so many new things to talk about. So thank you for being on the show, and thank you for hanging around and helping me interview my other guest. And his name is author Bryan Way, and this is what he says. Though I grew up near Philadelphia, I never really grew up. Now, that gives me pause to think. There is a question there. He preferred to write instead, and despite the fact that he always had, he was the last one to realize that he could write. He refused to call himself one until he had something published, and in 2013, his moment came. His first book was called Life After the Arising. And it's a coming-of-age odyssey and embodying his devotion to realism, strong characterizations, and pulpy zombie films. Ashley, another zombie fan.
Zombies!
Aha! Zombies! Hello, Bryan. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you?
I am marvelous. I am so glad you joined me tonight. I appreciate it so much.
I'm so honored to be here.
And we are going to talk zombies, but inquiring minds have to know. And I'm sure Ashley knows the question I'm going to ask. You refuse to grow up, so would that make you a modern-day Peter Pan?
I wouldn't say that it's always been a dream of mine to fly, but I certainly wouldn't mind it. I suppose, sure. No, I guess I have a little bit of a Peter Pan complex. I never really lost the wild enthusiasm of an 8-year-old, and though I have been able to do a pretty good job stuffing that down when need be, the idea of approaching any new writing project or creative project or anything like that still fills me with this blind, effervescent enthusiasm that I can barely contain.
In your bio,
yep, he's a writer.
He's a writer. In the stuff that I was reading about you, you never read much, though. You preferred to write your own story.
Yeah, it's. I didn't really notice it until I got older because a lot of school is, being given summer reading projects and being forced to write book reports on, these various books that have, certain significance to what you're going to be learning. And I will, of course, read those, and some of them I enjoyed. But I guess I realized by the time I was sort of coming out of being a teenager that when I would read, I would get distracted. And part of the reason I would get distracted is because, I have a wandering mind for starters, but on top of that, I would be thinking about things that I wanted to write. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that it came to me that, that was sort of the basis of how I conducted myself creatively. I didn't enjoy so much reading books as I enjoyed writing my own stories. So, I don't read a lot of novels, occasionally some short fiction. It's really more just like the news and, just like random articles. I certainly like reading stuff about what we know about the universe and stuff like that. But yeah, generally speaking, fiction is not really something that I read that much.
Well, I read also that Kurt Vonnegut is one of your preferred authors, and I find that very interesting. Why do you?
Oh, go ahead.
He is a strange, off-the-wall author.
Oh, he certainly is, and I can only think of a great example in Breakfast of Champions where he cuts himself off in the middle of a paragraph to draw an asterisk, which is, in his view, a picture of, a close-up of somebody's rear end, essentially. And something like that, certainly when I was growing up, is the type of absurdity that would send me into just hysterical fits of laughter, because there's so much in his prose that's informed by his experiences in Dresden, obviously, with Slaughterhouse-5, but there's that element of almost mischievous gaiety. He just can't suppress it. He can't go more than a couple of pages without making like a fart joke or something like that. And as intelligent of a man as he is, I love the fact that he just doesn't bother to suppress it. He just lets it all out there.
Sort of like a modern-day Peter Pan.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You're drawing strings that I didn't even realize were there.
Ashley, you got some questions. I know you do.
So I guess my first question would be, why did you pick the zombie genre?
The fascination started before I was really even old enough to realize I had fascinations. My mom bought me and my brother this little packet of Scholastic books, just little picture books with descriptions of monsters. There was one for vampires, one for mummies, and for some reason, one that I'll never understand, I just loved the zombie book. I just read it cover to cover dozens of times. Of course, at that point, I was probably 8 years old, so I hadn't seen, Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead or Return of the Living Dead or any of the movies that were in there. But there was just something about it that I keyed on. And then a couple of years later, I remember seeing the commercials for Resident Evil 2 for PlayStation 2 and insisting that I had to have it. And then I played it, and after playing it for a little while, I really liked it, but I knew that there had to be more. So I went out to what at the time was a Blockbuster Video and rented the original Dawn of the Dead from 1978 on VHS, and that was it. I was hooked. I'd never seen anything that so flawlessly incorporated this sense of fun, but also this sense of horror, and it was gross, but at the same time it was kind of surreal. The green skinned zombies and the fire truck red blood, and in spite of all of that, there was this beautiful social commentary. I think as far as films go, there's no better image of zombies walking through a shopping mall. That's how much better does it get than that? And so, even better, one of the characters, of course, dies in the movie, and it was the first time I remember seeing a horror movie where I actually cared that somebody was going to be no longer in the movie, and it devastated me. So that fascination stuck from there. I started writing short fiction, maybe a year or two later, and then it just kind of it always stayed with me, even before zombies became sort of the big thing in 2003.
Wow.
Well,
and then
Ashley,
I'm the same way. I've loved the whole, like I said, the whole social commentary, because you can go so many different ways in that genre with whatever you want to talk about, and that's exactly what I did in mine. So I'm going to ask you the question because everybody wants to know, I'm sure, are you a fan of The Walking Dead?
This is a great one. I get asked it occasionally. I am not a fan of The Walking Dead. I have never liked The Walking Dead.
Okay, now I have to know why.
So I remember hearing about it, and I was interested that a big network was going to be taking on like a week-by-week episodic zombie story. And the first episode, it just seemed to be that they were presenting so many of the tropes in the zombie genre, like sort of as though people who like that kind of stuff would be seeing it for the first time, like the protagonist has to kill a child in the first scene of the first episode. And I thought that was kind of a weak cold open, but I would never just say, okay, I'm not watching the show because the first 5 minutes were not interesting to me. And then they sort of go backward in time to before the zombie thing happened, and then they committed what is, in my view, the cardinal sin. They sort of presuppose the model of 28 Days Later, where the protagonist wakes up in a hospital, months or weeks or whatever after everything has gone down, and suddenly, the world's taken over by zombies. There's all the buildings are abandoned. There's so few people left. You never get to find out what happened with the military, how the government screwed it up, and so on and so forth. Because all those things are things that have to happen in order for there to be a zombie apocalypse. And I guess I was really hoping that somebody would show us the thing that we need to see, which is how do these things break down? What do people do when these things are breaking down? And when I progressed to the second episode, it just totally lost me. It just seemed like disconnected scenes of people beating up on zombies and just nowhere near the character development I was kind of looking for.
Interesting take.
Very interesting.
It's a very pretentious take, but yeah, that's how I felt.
Well, I will tell you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Miss Yvonne.
No, baby, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I am a fan of the show because in not everything that you just said, I agree with 100%. What draws me to the show is just what lengths will a human being go to survive. That's what draws me to the show. But the thing I don't like about it is exactly what you said. He wakes up. It's already happened. We have no clue what happened. We just know it happened. And so when I wrote mine, I refused to do that. I went back 2 years prior before it ever happened and told why. and that bothers me about that show because we still don't know. To this day, we don't know. You just don't know what happened. So that, but hey, I wish I had that much success is what they're having. That's wonderful. But it has made those of us that write that in that genre, it has made it easier for us to segue into that because of the popularity of that particular show.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as the seasons have gone along, I guess I was lucky that I could be kind of a passive observer. My fiance is she was a pretty big fan of the show for the first, I think, 5 seasons. I think she's kind of petered out since then. But I would get to catch, bits and pieces of like what they would do to solve certain problems, and I was never particularly crazy about them. But the fact that, this has been going on now, I don't know how long the time has elapsed in their world, but I'm guessing at least a couple of years, and they still have, ammunition and their guns still work. That's problematic for me. But then each season seems to be the same thing being repeated over and over again. Is they go someplace, they think it's safe, it's not what it turns out that they thought it was. They have to kill a lot of people, then they go on the run and they find another place, and so on and so forth. And I mean, I'd like to think that things wouldn't be so cut and dry.
And you're right, they wouldn't be.
Yeah, human beings are still in the equation.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and the really fascinating thing about zombies. I mean, of course, when I started writing it was just fun to write this post-apocalyptic stuff. But then when I think about them more, they're sort of an absence of morals. They don't do anything intentionally wrong because they're just basically animals running off a form of instinct. It's the people who do the wrong things, but the moral complexities of the characters can sort of be distilled by contrast, because you could have been like a relatively bad person before the zombie apocalypse happened, but then once it does happen, you decide that it's important to protect your family and make sure that, people live by a set of rules and so on and so forth. So even if you were a morally gray person before the zombie apocalypse happens, once the apocalypse happens, you get pushed into black or white. You don't have a choice.
Very good point. And isn't there another show out there now, guys, that shows the prequel to The Walking Dead?
Fear the Walking Dead. Fear the Walking Dead. Yeah.
And that's supposed to show what happened prior to everything going to hell in a zombie basket.
Yes, but unfortunately, in my opinion, I watched it. I watched the first season because I was interested. I'm thinking, okay, we're finally going to find out what happened. And we still didn't get answers. I was very disappointed.
Well, spinning off the zombies for a minute, Ashley, you'll find this very interesting. Because of my background and the things that I do and the way that my other life, I find out things about people. Beware, Bryan. Be very afraid.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Off the Chain, and I'm your host, Yvonne Mason. My guest tonight is author Bryan Way, and my co-host, who is my guest in the 8 o'clock hour, is author Ashley Fontainne. We have been discussing zombies because that is what they both love, and that is what they both write about. But now I'm going to ask Bryan a question which just absolutely blew me completely out of the water. Bryan, you went to Temple University, correct?
That's right, I did.
And you studied, Ashley, are you ready for this? He is a qualified researcher of UFOs.
Wow.
Explain that.
I'm happy that you dug that up. Okay, so it's funny, and it starts with the proviso that the course that I took is, by official accreditation means, the only accredited course on the study of UFOs in the world. You can go to, symposiums and listen to talks or whatever, but this is the only class in the world that you can get college credit for. The teacher of this class is Dr. David Jacobs. The doctorate that he has is in American history. But the interesting part is that the dissertation that got him his doctorate in American histories was written on the studies of the UFO phenomenon in the United States. Now, you can imagine when he was at school that the teachers who were overseeing him weren't particularly jazzed at the idea of him making this essentially the crux of his doctorate argument. But he made the argument very academically, using sourced articles of, the whole history of it is, enormously huge. But the sort of the one area where he got the most information from is that the government briefly studied the UFO phenomenon, particularly when it was becoming a big deal in the 50s. And the organization was called Project Blue Book. And so there's all these reports of people from all over the country reporting on, what UFOs they saw and all this information or whatever. And so regardless of whether they knew what to do with it, they logged all of this stuff. So he managed to get, security access such that he could view this stuff. And it wasn't like a big deal. It wasn't like the whole Roswell thing or anything like that. It was just they let him read these documents. He made his thesis on it. And then he's written a couple books on the subject, and he literally will tell you in the first class that you should think he's insane when he's teaching you this stuff. But he makes a pretty solid argument for there being UFOs and extraterrestrials and what the whole game plan is as far as people being abducted is.
Well, I tend to believe that it is entirely possible and highly probable, because we live in this small universe that we call Earth and the 9 planets, who's to say what's out there? If God can make us, he can make other universes. Correct?
Absolutely. And in as much as the subject always gets pushed into the little green men and coming from other stars or whatever, as much research as he's done, he's not prepared to make any conclusions when he doesn't have evidence, essentially. So as far as he's concerned, they could be it could be the hollow Earth hypothesis. They come from the middle of the planet. They could come from the future. They could we have no idea. But he knows that he knows and has convinced himself that there's something going on, and he uses his class to give an opportunity for his students to challenge him occasionally, bring him what their theories are or whatever. But the guy has in mind like a bear trap. I don't think there's a person who went up to him and said, "Oh, I think I saw a UFO," where he didn't say, "No, that was a comet. No, that was an airplane. No, that was this or that or the other thing." He's a fascinating guy, and fortunately, he has an excellent sense of humor, which if you're teaching a class like that, you need to have.
Yes, you would.
Ashley, I know you're dying. Go ahead and ask your question, honey. I know it's on the tip of your tongue.
So, what was your take on all of that? What is your opinion after being qualified? Do you believe, as they say in the X-Files, do you believe?
It's going to be the dumbest answer. I don't know.
But it's honest, right?
Yeah, no, I took the class. I was interested in everything he had to say, and of course, part of it in the back of my mind is thinking, "Oh, this is all going to be great material for a book or a short story someday." But he studied it in a very, I think, logical way that makes sense, his 2 books on the subject, the first one I think is Secret Life, the second one is The Threat. Secret Life deals with the psychological aspect of the abduction phenomenon. The Threat deals with where he thinks alien abductions are ultimately leading to, and as you can guess by the title, it's not leading in a particularly positive direction. But yeah, to my core, I just don't know. I think if things started to go south and it looked as though we were going to be overtaken by alien overlords, at the very least I could say, well, at least I had an idea this was going to happen.
I was somewhat prepared.
Yeah,
about that.
At least I worked on the thought experiment. I'm okay, being held under the reign of our alien overlords. I know there's nothing I'm going to be able to do about it, so got to kind of come to peace with it.
Well, we do have wormholes out there in the netherworld, so it's entirely possible.
Yeah, one of the things that occasionally pops up in my writing is my fascination with the Fermi paradox, the idea that, if the universe has, so many planets and there's been so much time or whatever, where are all the aliens, essentially? And, I think it's... as a species, we're pretty limited by, the fact that the furthest we've gone is just around the outside of our moon when, there's, untold gugaplexian miles that we haven't seen anything, and the best we can do is look at distant stars and see the way that the light flickers and guess that there's a planet in front of it. So I'm sure in the coming centuries we'll be able to find out more, but for the time being we're kind of stuck here.
Using our imagination, which brings me to, why did you write about zombies as opposed to UFOs? With all the information that I know because you love the zombies, but all the information that you had on UFOs, you could have done a zombie UFO phenomenon.
I guess in part because it came so much later. Like, I mean, I watched the X-Files growing up, and I loved movies like Fire in the Sky and stuff like that. But I didn't really learn a whole lot about it until I took that course, and that was in 2007, I think. So at that point, I'd actually written both of the first two books that would, form the Life After series, the Life After the Arising and Life After the Void. The first drafts of both of those books were essentially completed before I took the class. So that was the thing that I had sort of was like my nest egg. It just when I finished the drafts of those books, I realized that I wasn't a good enough writer to try to publish something, and I thought it would be dishonest of me to try to develop a book series without really knowing, where it was going. So that sort of took over, and that was why I went for the zombie thing. But the other part of that is that I saw much clearer earlier on what I wanted the zombie thing to be. And it starts with the protagonist as someone who's still in college and goes back to his hometown to see a marching band competition that his girlfriend's in. And then there's, boom, a zombie apocalypse. It starts, ground zero is the cemetery that's right next door to the high school. And so I decided to make the protagonist a fan of zombies and incorporate the history of zombie lore into the story. But it really sort of quickly became this examination of when we pass out of adolescence and into adulthood, the sort of apocalyptic notions that go along with that. Like, I mean, everybody learns these lessons at some point. Some people get it sooner, some people get it later, but life isn't going to be what you thought it was going to be. You're not going to, finish college or whatever and be a movie star. You're not going to, suddenly have a house and kids and everything's going to be idyllic and you're just going to save money for when you get to go on a vacation or something like that. Like, life continues happening to you. And so the idea that there's this college student who's possessed of the notion that he knows everything about zombies, then actually has to face the zombie apocalypse and finds out how little he knows, was fascinating to me. So that brought into the whole hubris of him learning from his own mistakes and getting to a point where he can sort of internalize and begin to survive, and then ultimately, hopefully, thrive.
I found interesting, again, in my research of you, there is a character that you put in one of the books that you didn't like very well.
Yeah, that's true. So it's getting a little bit into the writing process. I mean, other people have different ways of doing it. I've always found that George Martin's way of describing it works best, and that is that authors are architects or gardeners. The architects build their plot. They have all of the floors planned out of where everything's going to go, and then they actually sit and write it. The gardeners just kind of plant the seed and maybe see where it goes and add some water every once in a while. I'm definitely more of a gardener, so when I start writing something, it's really just like tunnel vision, like stream of consciousness. Like, I'm just sitting down and the words are coming out, and sometimes I don't even know where they're going. And in the case of this particular character, Melody, there's a chaotic escape scene from the football field where the zombie apocalypse happens, and when they get into their first safe place, I turned around and, as the writer, realized there's other people in this room with them. Who are these people? And so then I have to stop and go back and add them in, and then I have to start thinking about who these people are as characters. And I took little bits of people that I know and just certain archetypes that I remember of people that I knew in high school or whatever. And when I selected one of them, I was like, oh, it would be so great if they had this person who is just like oil and water with the rest of them, that none of them mesh up with, the high school queen bee, essentially, character. And as I was writing her, I was frustrated and irritated by the things that would come out of her mouth, and that was me attempting to channel her as the writer. And then the further I went along, the more I sort of solidified her place in the story, and then ultimately, as one of my friends who just finished the second book told me, she's the best character you've written.
Ashley, doesn't that sound familiar?
Yes, and it's funny how the strong emotion that you felt about this person in your memories and how they made you feel and the interactions you had with this person came out in the story.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think I realized from when I took some of my first screenwriting classes in college that when it came to characters and situations, it was always really much more fascinating to me to try to understand other people's perspectives than it was to try to use the writing medium as like a bully pulpit to, to get back at people who've slighted me in the past, ex-girlfriends or bullies or something like that. Like, it was always more fascinating to me that, whatever, you get picked on by a bully or whatever, but then when you grow up and you think about it, it's like, well, they're not just a bully in a vacuum, there's a whole history there. They have, maybe they're, one of their parents is abusive, or, maybe one of them's on drugs, or, maybe, who knows, like maybe they're going through some hardship that's causing them to behave that way, and that, more than anything, fills me with sympathy and makes me want to understand that person more, and of course that helps a lot when you're trying to write, rich, diverse characters.
Exactly.
That is very, very true. And as Ashley and I were talking about in the other segment, when we meet people, we leave part of ourselves, and of course we bring some of that person with us, whether it's a stranger on the street. And in our books, we do the same thing. We leave a whole lot of ourselves in that book, whether we know it or not. And like you say, it could be pent-up frustration. It could be from bullies. It could be any number of things. And what the reader gets out of that book may be entirely different from what we put in that book.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, the notion that we as the writers can't be standing over their shoulder and pointing at a patch of text and saying, here's what I was thinking when I wrote this segment. A writer and filmmaker that I really like, Nicholas Meyer, who did what most people agree to be the two best Star Trek movies, The Wrath of Khan and The Undiscovered Country, believes that when you, as a creator, as a writer or filmmaker or whatever, that when you finish something and put it out in the world, the person who created it has less authority in discussing that thing than the people who are seeing it, because their interpretations are just as valid. Just because they didn't take from it what you were trying to put into it doesn't make their interpretation of it any less valid, and that's one of the things that really makes art so exciting.
That is very true, because what I would get out of your zombie book at my age might be entirely different from what, say, a 17-year-old would get out of it.
Oh, sure, yeah, no. And my fiance's mom, when reading the book, was telling me how difficult it was for her to get through. Fortunately, not because she didn't like it, but because all she could think about was these, 15, 16, 17-year-olds thrown into this apocalyptic scenario, and their parents, like what their parents must be thinking about not being able to see them again, and trying to get to them or whatever. And it was just terrifying to her that they could be put in this situation. But it's one of the funny things about it is that again, exploring the whole idea of like an adolescent in a zombie apocalypse, we're so much bolder and braver and stupider when we're teenagers. So when we're put in that situation, it could seem like fun to us, or it could seem like the danger is minimized because we're dealing with it in a different way than an adult is, who, their first instinct might be like, we have to, find water and find like a bomb shelter or whatever. But the teenagers would be like, oh no, we're going out and having a good time. Are you kidding me?
We're going to go bash some heads in. Yeah, exactly. This is fun.
Because they have no fear.
Exactly, yeah. Which, occasionally that's a good thing, but most of the time it's a bad one.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Off the Chain. My guest tonight is author Bryan Way, and he has written several zombie books. He's written The Life After the Arising, The Void, The Cemetery Plot, The Basement, The Phoenix, and All Things Zombie. And my co-host is Ashley Fontainne, who is also into all things zombie. We're having a zombie love-in tonight. So if you love zombies, you're in the right place. Bryan, the first book called The Arising, that's when he goes back to his school and all hell breaks loose in a zombie basket. The
Correct.
second one is The Void. Tell me about The Void and where it goes from there.
Without spoiling the conclusion of the first book, some of the characters survive. Big surprise. And after going through the first 2 weeks of the apocalypse, they've settled down in a place where they think that they can be safe and kind of start working out, how they're going to ration food and all the day-to-day stuff of staying alive. The second book, The Void, picks up 2 months later. And so, as I sort of alluded beforehand, there's this apocalyptic scenario that happens, and all these people have to run, and suddenly you find yourself with a group of people that some of whom you know, some of whom you don't, and you just sort of have to make do, obviously because the main goal is that all of you are trying to survive. So now that they've settled down in a place together, they sort of have an opportunity to look around at each other and say, I'm not really sure I like these people. And not for any reason that they're doing anything specifically wrong or not sharing in the goal of trying to survive and do so equitably, but they just don't get along. And so I thought that if the first book was the sort of imagining the graduation from college and believing that, you're the master of the universe, your degree is going to get you a great job and so on and so forth, and then you find out that life's a lot more difficult than that. So if that's the first book, then the second book is, being broke and being forced to move back in with your parents, and then essentially waiting for your life to start. So these characters are all just stewing in this pot of rage, just at each other's throats. But as they're busy doing this, life continues to go on. If you don't choose to participate in it actively as yourself, life will find a way to get to you, whether that's because, you run out of money or, you get in trouble doing, God knows what. And so I thought the idea of the apocalypse still going on and they're kind of squabbling indoors, and then suddenly the things that are going on outside of their little realm start to have a huge effect on what's going on with them would be an interesting jumping off place for the second book. So it's a lot of meeting up with unsavory types, having friends who are in trouble and need to be helped out, and just sort of making these sort of moralistic decisions that, like I was sort of alluding to before, push you in the boundary from being in the moral gray on the sidelines and make you make a decision that's going to decide, are you a good person or are you a bad person?
So does that theme run into the third book, The Cemetery Plot?
The Cemetery Plot is actually a short story. The second book, The Void, just came out this past Tuesday. It's been a long time gestating, and it's self-published, so it's difficult for me to remember all of those dates. But yeah, the Void is the second book that just came out. I'm only just starting to work on the third one. As far as moving on with the future books, I think that the idea that I'm starting off with is abundant enough in further ideas that I'll have a lot of stuff to work from. I was thinking that the third book might be, the sort of leaving home book, essentially, the being forced to move on and uproot and start setting down somewhere else. The short stories are The Cemetery Plot, The Basement, and The Phoenix. Those are all basically, they're stories that I really enjoy having written, but they're sort of world building at the same time. My rule for writing short stories in the Life After series is that they have to be written in the third person, and that it has to include at least one minor character from the main story. So it's sort of, because the books take place all from the perspective of the protagonist, Jeff. So the books are both written in first person. You get shown a lot of things that you have to be forced into his perception of the events. And so I thought it would be interesting if I wrote the third-person perspective of what actually happened at these events. And so you may encounter, a car accident in Life After the Arising, for example. The Cemetery Plot shows you everything that led up to that car accident, and then, there's a brief, momentary encounter with the protagonist as he drives by and thinks whatever he wants to think about it.
Ashley, I know you're chomping at the bit. I know you've got a question.
Sorry, I thought I lost you for a minute there because I think my phone is close to conking out. I didn't charge it up enough, I don't think. But do you ever see yourself writing in a different genre, something completely, or are you, at this point, is this your main focus of what your writing's about?
I definitely feel tidally locked to zombies right now. I feel that it's the thing that I've been working on the most and put the most effort into. And like I said, I'm just starting to work on the third book, and I have some short stories that I want to pound out. But quite honestly, I really do find myself interested in all different sorts of things. I have a science fiction short story that's sort of inspired by like Twilight Zone called Hosts. That one's also available at the moment. But of course, the UFO stories is forthcoming. I have ideas for it, but I don't know exactly what to do with it yet. But I mean, the degree that I got at Temple was in film, and so I've actually always felt that I was a better screenwriter than I was a novelist. But unless you have some kind of connection, it's a lot easier to write your own book and publish it than it is to make a movie, because writing the book is just you, and the movie is hundreds of people often. But so having the screenplays already set up, several of them, I've got like a romantic comedy that I wouldn't mind seeing get made. I've got sort of a sci-fi kind of post-apocalyptic thriller. I have like a throwback to like a 50s B-movie kind of horror thing. And so I think the string that you kind of see there is that I do kind of tend further towards science fiction and horror, and that's not because I don't appreciate a good drama, but I don't know. To me, two people or more people arguing in a story over like class issues or something like that is way more interesting when it takes place 700 years in the future, or on some steampunk planet or something like that. I like the idea of having well drawn characters having the same problems that normal people have, but putting them in extraordinary circumstances.
Exactly.
And after our own heart.
Yep.
Not literally, though. I'm not a vampire.
Well, the thing is that Ashley and I have strangers that dance around in our heads, and your characters fit right there because we think along strange lines. And if you could write, produce, direct any one of the screenplays that you have written, and you were given one choice, which one would it be?
Oh boy, that's tough. That's a really difficult question. The romantic comedy one would be the easiest to shoot because it's basically just people talking. But if I was given one choice and I had to just pick one of them, I don't know if you are familiar with the video game Silent Hill from 1999. It was given a movie adaptation in 2006 that I particularly didn't like. As an exercise at the end of college, I adapted that the way that I felt it should have been adapted. And so I think if given the choice and, infinite resources to make one of the things that I had, it would be making a Silent Hill movie the way that I think it should be made. And that's partially because I really enjoy that story and I think it could be well told, but it's also kind of a curiosity of mine to find out if other people would feel the same way about it as I do, and if my perspective would be one that would interest them. And if that was the case, I would feel much better about, trying to pursue doing other things like that.
Interesting. Well, stranger things have happened from this show. And stranger things have happened in my life. Sometimes all I have to do is put something out there in the universe, and it happens. So because this is your dream and you're very passionate about it, we're just going to put that out there in the universe, and I guarantee you at some point somebody is going to pick you up. Number one, you're very creative. Number two,
thank you.
You are very welcome. You have a talent that I wish I had, and that is to be able to write with the mind of a teenager, a.k.a. young adult. I didn't think like those people when I was that age, and I can't think like them now. So for you to be able to create a story that is engaging, exciting, scary, and put it in perspective, God love you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have a little bit of the inside track there because I started writing the first draft of the story when I was still a teenager. But then, having not actually finished it until, I was, 28, I was still, in some sense, kind of a teenager. But having learned quite a few lessons since then, it was interesting to go back and edit it and think about things that I thought were stupid that maybe I thought I should take out, or decisions made by characters that didn't make any sense. But there was always a voice in the back of my head saying, no, that's what a teenager does. And I tried to stay true to that as best I could.
What's your thoughts on that, Ashley?
Well, definitely kudos. I'm lucky because, a lot of the stuff that I have that have teenagers in it, I base off, our children and their friends. So I don't really have to stretch too far. But, yeah, it's definitely hard to get into a different mindset when it's not what you're thinking and how you view the world, and you're having to step back and view it from someone else's perspective. It's always difficult.
And it's to me, it's very interesting to be able to get into that mindset because teenagers are strange. My mother used to say she wished that she could bury us when we turned 13 and dig us back up when we turned 30 because those people have no sense.
Yeah, honestly, the cultural disconnect between parents and their children's, certainly as their generation. It seems like every new crop that comes up, the parents are saying the same things about their kids, and the kids are saying the same things about their parents. They both think they're crazy. They both think the other side is crazy, and it goes all the way back to Aristotle. You can read it, in Greek history, where he talks about how lazy and entitled and disaffected the new generation is, and you could imagine any parent saying that about kids these days.
Yep, you're exactly
right. That is so true.
That is very true. Well,
give it another 15, 20 years, and the kids of today will be talking about how their kids are lazy and entitled and disaffected, and their kids will be saying, "Oh, our parents are so insane and they're so arcane and so backwards."
And technology will have gone light years ahead.
Oh yeah, that's the one thing that keeps changing. That's a cause for concern.
Bryan, what I would like for you to do, my dear, if you will, your books are marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. Can't wait to get my hot little hands on them. Is I want you to tell our audience where you can be found, where your books can be found, and how they can hook up with you on Facebook and your websites and all that good stuff.
So the closest thing I have to like a website or a blog is a live journal. Mostly on that I talk about just ideas about writing and criticism and stuff like that. But I've appropriately titled it The Luddite Ledger, predominantly because I am so stubborn when it comes to adapting to new technologies. I don't even own an iPod. So when the notion of building my own website came up, I was just like, I think I'll find someone else who will do it for me for free, and all I have to do is write the stuff that comes out on it. So unfortunately, I don't have my own website, and when it came time to self-publish, I was only going to do it through Amazon because that was the only system that I understood. So the books are available on Amazon. That's Life After the Arising and Life After the Void. Then there's 3 short stories that are connected to that, the one sci-fi short that's separate from it, and my contribution to all things zombies, Chronology of the Apocalypse. So Amazon is the place to find my books to buy for certain. Unless you want to come find me just outside of Philadelphia, I'd be happy to sell one to you personally and sign it. But yeah, so the Luddite Ledger is the blog that I write on. That's on LiveJournal. It's the Bryan Way at livejournal.com or whatever. And so my most frequently used handle on the internet is just the Bryan Way. It's so on Facebook, on Twitter, and LiveJournal, it's just TheBryanWay.
we're going to have to hook up, and Ashley and I'll build you a killer website just because we like you and you're a new author, and we believe in paying it forward.
Oh, thank you. That would be awesome.
We can do that, can't we, Ashley? Between the two of us, we can set him up one on WordPress and make it beautiful and make it so he can blog on it, and we can tag your live journal where it'll link to it, and then you'll get out there and people will see your wonderful one because your covers are killer. Your covers are just to die for.
Yeah, no, my best friend from high school did the first one, the little zombie arm coming out of the ground there is actually my arm. He took a picture of it and vectorized it, and he does things with Photoshop that I will never understand. But the rest of them are mine, so I really appreciate that.
Well, you're quite welcome. Now, I have another request, and that is well, before we do that, Ashley, you have more questions, I'm sure, before I ask you the big question.
But I hate to say this, my phone is blinking red, and I know at any minute I'm going to lose connection. So before that happens, I'm going to bow out before there's just dead air. So
never with you, my friend. Never dead air.
It was wonderful being on here and talking to you again. And Bryan, I wish you all the best of luck. And, of course, it's definitely going to go pick up your books because love zombies. And Yvonne, just thank you so much again for having me on here, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Oh, absolutely, honey, and we'll get you set up for next year. And friend Bryan, look him up on my friends list and friend him.
I will. I sure will.
I look forward to being your friend.
Okay, I'll talk to you. Y'all have a great rest of the evening.
All right, sweetheart. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, Bryan, the question that I have for you, my friend, is the question that I ask every guest that I have, and I do want you to come back after the first of the year as well because I know that you're going to have some new work out, and we have to keep getting you out there so that people will buy your work because from what I hear, these books are just phenomenal. Young people should just eat them up. But the question that I have for you is, if you were to give someone some advice that has a dream, has a passion, have a desire, what would you tell them?
Oh, boy. The message would be so mixed because part of giving people advice in pursuing their dreams or whatever is inevitably going against some advice that you've gotten from somebody else in the past that you've may have agreed or disagreed with, and maybe it worked and it didn't work. But so much of what we do in pursuit of our dreams or whatever is comprised of mistakes. You're gonna do things that are stupid. You're gonna have accidents. You're gonna screw up along the way. But I guess the most important thing, if you're following a dream, is to never lose faith in it. Which is, I know people, I'm sure, have been saying that for thousands of years, but it can be easy to get discouraged when, you're trying to get a book published and you're getting rejected by publishers left and right, or, if you're trying to write a movie and, someone's telling you it's stupid or something like that. The important thing is to not lose sight of the reason why you set out to do what it was you were going to do. And it's okay to internalize people's criticisms. You can shut out the negative stuff, but if you come up against people who are trying to help you and being critical, it's important to internalize their perspective too. But again, the thing that's at the root of that is that you really just have to keep believing and be willing to change. Your goals will change, obviously. So if you're willing to change with them, then, you could end up being someplace that you never even imagined, and it could be the best thing that's ever happened to you.
Do you agree that if we don't at least pursue the dream, that we've already failed?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, no, I can see, examples of that throughout my life where, with me and, friends and family members or whatever. And there's millions of reasons why people ultimately don't end up pursuing their dreams. And in some cases, that has nothing to do with their ability to control it. Sometimes it's out of their reach. But you know, as long as you keep it. I mean, it's easier to talk about it when it comes to like doing a book or something like that, because you can always write. I mean, that's basically free. But when it comes to pursuing those other dreams, it's just you got to be honest about, you know, what you're going to be able to do and where it's going to be able to take you.
And sometimes the dreams change. Sometimes
Absolutely,
the journey
yeah.
And that doesn't mean we failed at the first dream. It just means that we took a different path.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the amount of times that I've changed something that I had intended to do or whatever, not just in writing, of course, but throughout my life, are legion. And usually it's because, you know, I've learned something and I found a way to incorporate it. So I think that sort of, I mean, humorously enough, plays into my whole conception of a zombie apocalypse. And everybody's talking about, you know, we gotta get weapons, and then you have to have your doomsday bunker all set up. I really think it's more about improvisation than anything else. You have to be able to think on your feet. You have to be able to learn as you go. Because if you don't do that, then, you know, you're basically sunk already.
Well, if there was one thing that you could go back and change in your life that would help you on your journey, what would it be?
I absolutely would have gone into Temple as a film major. I went originally as a communications major with some weird dream that I would be like a sports commentator. I don't even know why I harbored it. But I switched midway through the first semester, but I couldn't actually start taking the film courses until the next year. And the effect of that was that I didn't have any other classes with the next year's new classmen. So as a result, I didn't make any friends in the film program. And, of course, in the film business, having friends is everything.
That is true. It's not what you know, but who you know.
And who knows you.
And who knows you. Hook up with a friend of mine on my friends page. His name is Jesse Cozell. He is a filmmaker. Also hook up with my friend Nicholas Grabowski. He lives in California, and he owns Black Bed Sheets, which is a publishing company. But he also knows a lot of people in the industry.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely look him up. Always wanted to meet new people.
Well, and Nicholas is very, very personable. He is one of the nicest human beings. He was on one of my shows here a while back, but he wrote Halloween 4, which he was asked to write it after Halloweens 1, 2, and 3 came out, and that's how he got started. He also got rejected a lot of times and got taken a lot of times, so he's been around the block like we have for a while. But hook up with him, and let's see if we can't get some of your screenplays out there.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if that... Go ahead.
Go ahead, sweetheart.
I was going to say, I mean, if we can do that, you can always be sure I'm going to thank you.
It's what I do. I just pay it forward. And what we'll do is we'll build your website and get it out there. And there is a new website that I just found. It's called Stage 32. Go look it up and fix your profile on it, because it is for movie directors, stagehands, screenplay writers, authors, musicians. It's for that industry.
Cool.
And they're always putting stuff up and looking for things. So hook up there. We will get you out there. You'll probably be sick of it. You'll probably be saying, Yvonne, leave me the hell alone.
Oh, I doubt it.
But if we don't get you exposure, darling, they're not going to know you're there. And I'm going to tell you, the garbage that I'm seeing coming out of Hollywood now is pitiful, because all they're doing is remaking old movies. Now, granted, classics don't need to be remade.
No, I had a film professor who actually was an Oscar winner. Did production design for movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and he worked with Hitchcock before and stuff, and his perspective on that, which I agree with very much, is you remake the ones that had good ideas but kind of stank. And I think there's plenty of opportunities for something like that, and maybe it didn't even necessarily have to just stink, but maybe they're sort of an affectation of their time. Like some of my favorite movies from the 80s are remakes of horror movies. The David Cronenberg's remake of The Fly, John Carpenter's remake of The Thing, that are just those abilities of the film artisans went so far beyond what was available back in the 50s that it stands to reason that they could use some updating. So you can take a kind of campy, B horror movie from the 50s and turn it into something that's legitimately terrifying today.
But they kept the basic storyline.
Mhm. Yeah, that's.
But sadly,
that kind of stuff it never gets old.
No, but what bothers me is we have so much, like you, so much creative talent out there. Why do we keep remaking old movies? And granted, some of them, like you say, need to be updated, but why can't we take this new talent and run with it? I don't understand it.
I understand it only a little bit. I mean, it's unfortunate that there's less of a trend towards taking chances with like smaller movies these days. But I mean, some of it's just pure, like financial issues that are with the studios or whatever. Some of which ties into like movies being pirated and stuff like that, where they know if they've got a property on their hands that's popular, like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that. They know that just the name recognition alone will sell tickets, and in some cases it makes them a little bit more afraid to try something new and try something interesting because there's so much more of a risk represented by it.
But that's a shame.
I agree, but that's as far back as the medium is concerned. Like taking risks, the name of the game. Like some of the movies that nobody had any expectations for whatsoever became some of the more popular ones from that time. Who knew that Terminator was going to be a success when they made it? That genre wasn't particularly popular at the time, but they came out the same year as Amadeus, and sure, Amadeus won a boatload of Oscars, but if you asked the average person on the street if they've heard of the Terminator, they'd say yes.
And they could tell you every line. And who knew Forrest Gump would become so popular?
Yeah. They were making a studio movie, modestly budgeted, and all of a sudden, boom! It's it's still a cultural touchstone. Those lines still come out of somebody's mouth, like once or twice a week,
if not more.
Yeah.
What will happen tonight after the show is the show will go into archives, and once it goes into archives, it immediately will upload to iTunes under Off the Chain on the podcast. Then it will immediately upload to Stitcher, which is played on Sirius Radio. Then I will take and upload it on SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Spreaker, which Spreaker uploads it to TuneIn Radio and YouTube. I also upload it to podcast and podcast.com. And what I will do is once I upload all this stuff, I will tag you on everything, and then I want you to download it, and I want you to blow it out there everywhere. I want you
Absolutely, it'd be my pleasure.
Well, this is for you, my friend. This is your advertising. This is me pimping you, and I want you to blow it out there so that the folks out there can see we have this fine, outstanding, not only a brand new author, but a wonderful screenplay writer who knows how to put screenplays together. I mean, you could do a teeny bopper screenplay and make a killer movie out of it.
I haven't tried it, but I would be willing to.
Well, think of some of the stuff, Twilight, for instance. Or is it Twilight? Whatever it is, with the zombies with the glitter. Zombies don't wear glitter.
No, not the specific target market that I'm looking at, but yeah, no. Hopefully I can write something that people would like. I mean, that's kind of what commercial writing is all about.
Exactly. So when I get all of this put together, I'll start sending you the links. and then you can download it from anywhere, any of the links that I send you, and then you can use bits and pieces, or you can put the whole thing up, or you can just put your hour up, and we get your web page up, and you can link to all the podcasts. Yeah, she's going to cut us off. Link to all the podcasts, and that will help you. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Off the Chain. My guest tonight has been Bryan Way. Thank you so much, Bryan, for agreeing. It's been an honor. I've loved every minute of it. My 8 to 9 guest was author Ashley Fontainne. Tomorrow night, my guest is a young author named David Jones. The show will start at 8 o'clock Eastern, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Bryan, again, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you. I hope you'll have me back.
Oh, absolutely. You're coming back. After the first of the year, you are coming back, my friend.
And I look forward to that.
Good. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a dream, live it. If you have a passion, make it happen. Believe in yourself. Love yourself. Laugh a lot. Love a lot. But most of all, forgive yourself and forgive those that wrong you, because at the end of the day, they've moved on. If you hold on to grudges and you hold on to hate and anger, then you just grow old, bitter, and die alone. Me, I'm going to be dragged out kicking and screaming, along with the monkeys. So tomorrow night, join me on Off the Chain. I am your host, Yvonne Mason, and we will see you then. Until then, we are out. Bryan, thank you, my dear, so much. I will get a hold of you as soon as I get off of here and start uploading. And go to WordPress.com, and we will start building you a website. How does that sound?
That sounds delightful. Thank you.
All right, darling. I'll talk to you later.
Have a good rest of your evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Record better audio anywhere with Motive digital microphones from Shure. Easy-to-use options like the MV88 plug directly into your phone or computer and include a free app. Create studio-quality sound for podcasts, music, and videos. Visit Shure.com to learn more.